You're listening to Rockers in Recovery Radio. If you'd like to find out more information, go to rockersinrecovery.com or Rockers in Recovery on Facebook. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.
Hey, John Hollis with Rockers in Recovery. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. If you're listening to Rockers in Recovery, you're listening either on Facebook or you're listening at our rockersinrecovery.com site. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. We got a great show in store for you. Today's, of course, guest is musician and singer-songwriter Jack Spann. Topic is Jack's new record, Beautiful Man from Mars, and his work on David Bowie's final album, Blackstar. You know, it's a great day when we can sit down and have a day filled with hope and love and a lot of other great stuff, and most importantly, the topic of music and recovery. Also, along with us today is Gary Tannen. And Gary Tannen is a music producer and works with Jack's band, and we're going to get both of them on the line. Jack, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John.
Gary, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. Good to be back.
Hey, listen, the last one was great, and we're looking forward to a great one here, too. Jack, seems like you've been working diligently. Can you tell us a little bit about your work with Bowie and how that process worked out?
It was 4 days of being in the studio. He was really, really nice. I mean, just a pleasant individual to sit next to and to play for. Being a songwriter, and I'm a multi-instrumentalist myself, and a lot of times I will have ideas that sound crazy to people, and I'll either write them or I'll hum them or suggest them. And so in that role, I think I did a really good job of doing what he needed to push his project onto the next level. A lot of that's just helping the person who's written this song and who has this sweeping idea to realize their dream. I'm not sure if David actually reads music, or I guess Tony Visconti does. I'm not really sure, and I never got
Tony does.
into the but when you listen to Bowie's albums, there's so much that just can't be put into words, and I don't know how anyone could explain it to someone and say, this is what I would like for it to sound like. So I hope I did a very small part and hopefully an important part in helping David Bowie make his last recording.
It was amazing. The whole album, the final album was amazing.
Yeah, I like to say Jack is maybe being a little bit modest here, because spending 4 days in the studio with Tony Visconti, David Bowie, Zach Alford, Tony playing bass, bottom line is those were the definitive, times prior to Blackstar actually getting recorded by the group of musicians that actually did it. This was in the formulating stages. At least for me, those are probably the most important parts of working on a record, are when the development of the ideas into the song structures and into what ends up being quote unquote the final version. So I don't think the day is out or over on whether Jack's work will ever come out in the back catalog releases, because they'll plummet that back catalog. Every aspect of everything Bowie has done, hopefully, we'll get a chance to breathe fresh air and be released, so that all the rest of musicians and the generations can be inspired by. The guy's basically an enigma. Not
the
only
whole process. The process.
Right,
it's
exactly.
The process of putting it together.
And it's very educational to have that insight if it's possible.
I see that what this has really, taken place has, it's worked out for you to be able to produce Beautiful Man from Mars. And I think that, if I'm not mistaken, it sounds like you really wrote this in regards to this whole topic.
I do have an anecdote about that. that I'm not even sure if I've ever shared with Gary. But, a couple of months after this all happened, and David had actually offered me his next tour, so I was kind of, I kind of thought that was going to happen for a few months, and then, fate intervened, and it didn't. I heard an interview with Pete Seeger on NPR, and he was talking about the first time that he heard "This Land Is Your Land," rather disparagingly, saying, "Oh, it's such a simple song, they like that song." And I think that's when it occurred to me, I need to write a simple song. I've got these lyrics about this beautiful man from Mars, and the only way to actually get it across to people, the only way that I was able to, is to just have I'm not disparaging the melody. I think it's a beautiful melody, but it is really simple. It's a little sing-songy, and I can see, children singing along with it. So after having that idea, the words just came. It was one of those things where you can't even write it down quickly enough.
And Jack, just so the listeners are aware, this happened as a result of you working after you had worked with Bowie in the studio for those 4 days. The Beautiful Man from Mars was the song that came after that, correct?
There were a few months between the time I walked away from Electric Ladyland Studios and that song came about. And, I've been listening to a lot of stuff. I've been listening to Coltrane. I've been listening to a lot of blues, a lot of jazz. But that was the melody that I remembered, and I was just so wanting to write something about the incredible good fortune I had to go in and play with him for a few days. And after that, the rest of the songs just kind of came one by one. And Gary, you were there, so you saw it all happen.
Right.
Yeah, well, that's kind of a cool story in itself, because Bowie's producer introduced you to Gary.
He certainly did, through a mutual friend. I've been playing all kinds of gigs. Got a couple of original bands in the last year. I've been doing piano bars. I did the Broadway show Warhorse at Lincoln Center. Wow! And so I just had a lot of strings pulling from different directions. And one day I got a call, and I thought it was a joke. And basically the message was, "This is Tony Visconti, and I got your phone number from such and such a person, and can you play such and such a style of music? Could you please call me back? Could you show up at the studio, in a couple of days?" And me being the person I am, I called him right back and said, "Yeah, of course, I can do anything that you ask, and whether I could do it or not. I mean, I would not pass up that wonderful opportunity." So I walk in the front door of the studio, and this man just walked right up to me, stuck out his hand. Yeah, I don't want to do a Bowie accent, but it was more or less like, "Hello, Jack. Welcome to the studio. We're going to have a great time." And he was that friendly to me for the entire process. I know that, a lot of us artists are tortured and we have conflicts, and I never saw any of that. I just saw these guys being really nice and professional and, just working together. And I've been around a lot of musicians and writers and actors, and, you get all those egos in the same room sometimes, and has the potential to be a little messy. But this was not. This was one of the smoothest studio experiences I've ever had. There was some negotiating on the first day. Jack, play this, play that. I'd like to hear this sound. And then after we, I was surprised that I got called back for the second day and for the third day, but, I did. So, it was a good experience. Like Bowie he was my icon. I remember being in high school and walking down the street and hearing, Space Oddity on the radio and thinking my life has now changed because I've heard something that I had no conception could ever exist or that I could ever originate myself without the guidance of one of the masters.
Well, the cool part about this, Jack, and I think that the overall message here.
So you guys still there?
That Yeah, you found your niche, right? In the fact that you loved Bowie's music. Years later, here you are in the studio with him, working with him. Afterwards, you have the fortitude and understanding that this experience is now coming out in paper, and Beautiful Man from Mars is born. And then, of course, you get together with Gary and you put together the CD and the album and produce the album. How long did it take to produce the album for Beautiful Man from Mars?
Yeah, so I have a friend who has a very nice studio in Seattle, and I went out there last year in 2000, I don't know,
14,
late 2015. 2015. Started recording tracks with an old drummer friend of mine because I'm from St. Louis originally. And speaking of Rockers in Recovery, Rob, who plays drums on about 2/3 of the tracks on the album, I don't think he's a member of Rockers in Recovery, but he's been drug and alcohol free for like the last 12 years. So, but anyway, so we were there and came up with a bunch of songs, recorded them, came back to New York and had no idea, what I had done. I mean, it was just like a bunch of different unconnected songs, basically. And I did not record Beautiful Man from Mars in Seattle. That happened after getting advice from Gary. I would have to say, Gary, if I'm not describing this correctly, let me know. But, I basically had a bunch of disparate, unconnected material, and I would have to say with Gary's help and guidance, I turned it into an album, like a real album. So Gary was there to record Beautiful Man from Mars and, many of the other songs, Just Another Version of You, Jackin' Around. Yeah.
Then we did. We added.
I personally believe that I could produce someone else's album, but I don't think I could produce my own. At least not without some help. I'm too close to it, and I'm sure that we all feel that way because we're all musicians and songwriters, and you've got to have friends to help, to point out when you're doing something wrong, and more importantly, to point out when you're hitting the mark.
Here's the question, and here's the question I have for Gary. What was it like overall to work with Jack through the process and the end process of putting it out? It's taken a while to get this together, and you're now releasing it, and you're getting ready to do some more work with Jack. What's in the hopper, and what was it like to produce this whole thing?
Well, Jack said it pretty accurately. The timeline was there was a couple other things going on. Jack's first record, I also had helped with production. So during the time that Jack had decided to go out to Seattle to record some more material, I was in the process of finishing his first record, mixing it, adding some of my own keyboard arrangements on top of what he had. So we had two things going on. Jack was starting to record the second record, which, like he said, didn't have Beautiful Man, the song, on there yet. And we had put out the first record, Time. And so there was a lot going on. And then Jack, being the wealth of constant creativity, which is, one of the things I love about him, is it's like it's not a question of how much stuff Jack will come up with, but how can you settle him down to working on a dozen or so to finish? And people should have such problems. Anyway,
I have to agree with you on that.
Yeah, and so having had lots of experience working with all sorts of different kind of artists, the thing that is special about Jack is his his nonstop creativity. So it's not a question of whether he'll come up with the stuff. It's just a question of how can you rein it in. So I think one of the magical things about this, and you know, I don't want to attribute to where the magic comes from, because everybody has their own ideas on the spirituality of life and spiritual message. But I will say this, that when we put out the first record, Jack was not allowed to discuss, and this is one of the things that isn't evident about this. Jack was not allowed to discuss the fact that he had worked with David Bowie. That was he had signed a non-disclosure agreement. So it wasn't until his first record actually came out and David Bowie had died that it was months after that Jack finally sought permission to even be able to discuss that he had been involved with Bowie, because it was you were not to mention it, and Bowie was very famous for this. So Jack got permission that it was okay.
Gary, yes. Even after Bowie died, even a year after he was dead, I would still not discuss this with anyone except for you and my wife.
Right.
I think you were the only two people that knew, and I feel like I wanted to honor that agreement forever until
exactly.
It was okay to not honor it. So anyway, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that you had sought the approval to be able to even mention it, and it wasn't until then that Jack felt comfortable, or certainly I, giving him any advice, would have said it's okay to talk about that, right? But I didn't know. You know, I had an inkling because Tony Visconti had sent Jack to me, and I'm thinking, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I wonder if there's any connection. But I had no clue until after Bowie died and months after that before we got the approval to actually discuss it. So Jack had sent me it started off as a demo for the song Beautiful Man from Mars. The moment I heard it, I said, Jack, this has to be on the record. And it was something that was after the Seattle stuff. So in a strange way, all of this came around to almost being inspired to happen, because here was this, tribute to the Beautiful Man from Mars coming from Jack that probably wouldn't have made the record if it wasn't, self-evident how great it was. And really, that's my, besides all the technicality, right, like how we actually did this, which is kind of boring to a lot of people. I look at, the happenstance of how these things happen, and also the fact that David Bowie himself had been in recovery for many years prior to his passing.
Well, I was going to say, side note was Tony and David were both in recovery and very open about it.
Yes. And so, if you look at the universe conspiring to do things, here we are on Rockers in Recovery Radio actually talking about, three of us.
And you're pretty open about yours, too.
Yeah, right. And so it's kind of it's almost a vortex of the universe bringing this together. I feel most accomplished about that. It's like, when things are kind of similarly minded, or at least in a spiritual sense, right? You go, oh, okay, these people are on this kind of a wavelength, and somehow it's conspired to making this through Jack, and Jack will often, I don't want to speak for Jack, but I know that he's told me that, often the best stuff that he works on, and artists that I've worked with that are really, really somebody, people I look up to, they don't take credit for the songwriting. You know what they'll tell you, and I've had this experience myself, is like, hey man, don't give me credit for just happening to be a channel. Jack, you can support this, that's what it really feels like, is momentarily that somehow you've opened a channel to the universe, and through you come the chords and the words, which is, again, the highest form of art, I think.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. And I don't know I know that I claim that for myself, and the musicians that I work with that are in my band, I tell them the same thing. It's not about me. It's about this song that somehow came to me. I don't know if that's a high form of self-deception, if I'm, merely stroking my own ego by saying that. But yeah, I feel like, the more I get in the way, many times, or that my ego gets in the way, the more the music suffers because of that.
Well, here's the good news, guys. We're coming towards the end of the show, and I just want to mention one more thing. The good news is two things, actually. We had a great show with both of you, and I'm really glad that both of you were on. If you're listening to the show today, it's musician, singer-songwriter Jack Spann, along with his music producer, Gary Tannen, and we're talking about Beautiful Man from Mars, which is his new record, and also how we worked with David Bowie. Coming up pretty quick is the Summer Best. It's the world's largest rock festival, and it takes place up in Milwaukee. Yes. Jack has been asked to come back a second time. He did, of course, right after his first release. You went and played, and you've been asked to come back. Looking forward to hearing more about that, and most importantly, if you can, please, today, go to jackspann.com. You can find out a lot more information. You can also find him on Facebook, and, Jack Spann Music, or Jack Spann Band, at Jack Spann Band on Facebook. And we are going to debut today, Beautiful Man from Mars, and also Fear or Loyalty. We're going to debut both of those, and we thank you for the debut rights to be able to do that, Jack and Gary. We look forward to having you back onto the show. Hey, listen, it's been a pleasure. Really has.
Hey, man.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and thank you for being on. Gary, thank you for being on.
You got it, John. We'll talk later.
All right, sounds good. Rockers in Recovery, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. You can listen to music and clips from our past shows by going to rockersinrecovery.com. This actual interview will be right there wherever you're listening to it right now. It turns into the archive, so you can share it with whoever you want. And again, we thank you for tuning in and being a part of Rockers in Recovery. And we look forward to having Gary and, of course, Jack back on the air with us in the future. If you don't know, we are having a festival. It's the Rockers in Recovery Love of Recovery Music Festival. It's going to be held on September the 9th, and we're holding that up in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. We look forward to having you guys come on out, and it starts at noontime and goes until 5 p.m. We are very grateful to, of course, our sponsors for making that possible. And you can go to rockersinrecovery.com, click on events, and you'll find out all kinds of information about other events that are happening, too. We got 4 or 5 of them happening, but the big one's going to be up in Wilkes-Barre. We're looking forward to doing that. You can also, if you want to find out information, you can go to Rockers in Recovery on Facebook and click on, of course, the events page. And again, the sponsors for up there in Wilkes-Barre, we want to thank them. It's Clearbrook Treatment Centers, Atlantic Biotech, The Shores, Treatment and Recovery, Amethyst Recovery Center, Little Creek Lodge, Hope and Grace Recovery Center, and Sobriety Unplugged. They are the guys that are sponsoring that event in September. So we thank those guys for sponsoring. And today's sponsor for this show is Rehab Nexus.
Come on, children, don't you want to see? He was stuck in a space wind, but now he's free. Oh, He sits real peaceful on top of a tree. Then he comes rushing by at 1,000,000 degrees. And he's cheerful, and he's here, and he's green, but he's beautiful. When he says if you're strong, no one could ever tell you you're wrong. So come on, catch him before it's all gone. A beautiful man from Mars. Well, they're selling statues to stick on your lawn. A beautiful man from Mars. He knows 2,000 languages, talks with everyone. A beautiful man from Mars. He can speak to all animals in their own tongue. A beautiful man from Mars. And he's strong, but he's there with his tattoos and his long copper hair. If you knew him, it would show he's beautiful. Oh, but don't take my word, ask the people who know. Oh, 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 oh. Someday, if I have any say, we'll fly to your doorstep and take you away. Yeah, he's got long copper hair, cut down to there, green and beautiful. Man, beautiful man, beautiful man. Mars, a beautiful man, beautiful man, beautiful man from Mars. You work really hard, but you can't make it work. And before it gets better, it gets worse. But you stay till it hurts, hurts that you stay. Feet want to move, but you can't run away. Is it fear or loyalty that keeps you in its sway? If it's fear or loyalty, only you can say. What do you love? Do you love what you do? Does your own reflection tell you what's true? What would you change if you could change your track? Would you soldier yourself? Try not to look back. Is it fear or loyalty keeps you in its sway? If it's fear or loyalty, only you can say. Are you ready to take on a change? Are you willing to keep things the same? Oh, what will you do with your pain? Now you fail to see the point of being so afraid to fail, and you feel like the dog who cannot catch his tail. You have what it takes, it might take all you've got to get out of this place. Go on, give it a shot. Is it fear that keeps you in its sway? If it's fear